They called me a relic, a useless, aging burden in my own daughter's life. The words, sharp and dismissive, were spoken in French, a language they believed was their impenetrable shield. They sat in the dining room of the house I had helped my daughter, Chloe, buy, sipping wine I had paid for, and dissected my existence with clinical cruelty. My son-in-law, Sebastian, led the charge. Il ne comprend pas un mot, he had sneered. He doesn't understand a word. Just a sad old man living off his daughter's kindness, a weight around her neck. His mother, Isabel, with her perfectly coiffed silver hair and jewels that cost more than my first car, had nodded in agreement. Une pauvre chose, she murmured. A poor thing. No purpose left. Chloe would be liberated if he were elsewhere. His father, Henri, a man whose face seemed permanently set in a mask of mild disdain, added his own verdict. Pathetic. To have nothing left to offer the world but your presence at the dinner table. They laughed, a soft, conspiratorial sound that was more cutting than any shout. They thought their secret language was a weapon. They were wrong. It was their Achilles' heel, and I had been waiting my entire life for people like them to make exactly that mistake. Their celebration of their own perceived superiority was the starting pistol. I was going to show them the profound, irrevocable cost of mistaking a lifetime of kindness for inherent weakness. My name is Arthur Pendleton, and this is the story of how I reclaimed my daughter and my dignity. It began on a Tuesday, with a phone call that felt less like an invitation and more like a subpoena. I was in my Portland kitchen, the morning sun filtering through the bay window and illuminating the dust motes dancing above the counter. I was methodically measuring out the Ethiopian Yirgacheffe beans from my favorite local roaster, a small Tuesday ritual I cherished. The phone buzzed, an insistent vibration against the granite. Sebastian's name flashed on the screen. "Arthur," he said, his voice dripping with a synthetic cheer I had come to recognize as his "I want something" tone. "How are you holding up?" "Sebastian," I replied, pausing with the ceramic filter in my hand. The question was always holding up, never how are you? It framed my life as a constant struggle against decline. "I'm well. And you?" "Great news," he barreled on, ignoring my question. "My parents flew in from Lyon last night. We're hosting a dinner tomorrow evening. Very intimate, just family. They're quite eager to finally spend some proper time with you." I walked to the window, the phone pressed to my ear, and looked out at the sprawling Japanese maple that I'd planted in the backyard the year Chloe turned 10. We'd picked it out together from a nursery, her small hand in mine, and she'd named it Mr. Whispers, for the sound its leaves made in the wind. "Is that so?" I said, my voice neutral. "And Chloe? Is she eager too?" A pause, brief but telling, hung in the air. "She's the one who suggested it," he lied smoothly. "She's just swamped with finalizing the menu and dealing with a work crisis. You know how she gets when she's stressed, scatterbrained." Chloe, my fiercely organized, detail-oriented daughter, was many things, but scatterbrained was not one. When Chloe forgot something, it was almost always because someone had deliberately made her believe it was unimportant. "I see. What time should I arrive?" 7:30, at the house in Lake Oswald. And Arthur. His voice took on a careful, almost paternalistic edge. "Maybe dress formally? My parents are quite traditional, very old-world French. They appreciate quiet dignity." Quiet dignity. The phrase was a velvet glove hiding an iron fist. It was code for sit still, speak only when spoken to, and don't embarrass us. As if I, a man who built a multi-million-dollar international consulting firm from scratch, needed instruction on how to behave at a dinner table. "Of course," I said, my tone flat. I'll be on my best behavior." After he hung up, I stood in the sudden silence of my kitchen. The rich, aromatic promise of the coffee now seemed bitter and unappealing. The call had left a residue of unease. It wasn't just the condescension, it was the calculation behind it. I was being managed, a variable to be controlled. But I would go. For Chloe. She was the only tether I had left to the family I thought I'd built. The only reason I tolerated Sebastian's preening arrogance. She was still my little girl, the one who used to climb into my lap with a book of fairy tales, demanding I read them in both English and French, giggling at my accents. I poured the untouched coffee down the sink. When people start talking about quiet dignity, they're almost always planning to test the limits of yours. The following evening, I drove through the manicured, silent streets of Lake Oswego. The houses were large, impeccably maintained fortresses of affluence, each lawn a perfect green carpet, each Mercedes or BMW in the driveway a testament to conformity. Sebastian and Chloe's home was a modern take on a Tudor, all dark beams and cream stucco, a monument to his aspirations. Chloe opened the door before I could even ring the bell. "Dad," she said, her smile genuine, her hug warm and tight. She smelled of lavender and vanilla, a scent from childhood that always brought a lump to my throat. "You look so handsome." "Your mother always said I cleaned up nicely," I replied, returning her embrace, my eyes taking in the slight tension around hers. In the living room, Sebastian stood beside his parents, Henri and Isabelle Duval. I had met them briefly at the wedding 4 years ago, an event that had cost me over $80,000 and had left me with a vague sense of having financed my own demotion. They had been aloof then, arriving late, leaving early, and spending the majority of the reception speaking in rapid French with a small cluster of guests from the old country. Henri was still a tall, imposing figure, with a full head of silver hair and a posture that suggested a military background. Isabelle was petite and elegant, dressed in a simple but exquisitely cut cream-colored dress, her makeup flawless, her smile a practiced curve of her lips. "Sebastian, Arthur," he said, a master of ceremonies announcing the sideshow. "You remember my parents, Henri and Isabelle?" Henri extended a hand, his grip firm and brief. "Of course, the father of the bride. A pleasure to see you again under more relaxed circumstances." Isabelle offered a nod that was just a fraction too shallow to be truly respectful. "We barely had a moment at the wedding. Such a whirlwind. It is good to finally have a proper conversation." "Welcome back to Portland," I said. "I hope you're finding the city to your liking?" "Oh, it has its charms," Isabelle replied, her eyes scanning me from head to toe, taking in my well-tailored but conservative suit. "It is very American." Chloe opened the door before I could even ring the bell. Chloe appeared with a tray of wine glasses filled with a deep ruby liquid. "I opened the Chateauneuf du Pape, Dad. I know you don't drink much, but I thought for a special occasion." I took a glass. "Thank you, sweetheart." I sipped carefully. It was an excellent wine, complex and bold. Superb! The Rhone region produces such robust, characterful wines. Henry's eyebrow arched almost imperceptibly. "You are familiar with French wines, Arthur?" "I have had the pleasure to travel there on business," I said simply. Sebastian clapped his hands together a little too loudly. "Shall we move to the dining room? Mom and Dad are eager to hear all about, well, everything." As we walked, I caught a fleeting, silent exchange between Henri and Isabelle. It was quick, a mere flicker of the eyes and a slight tightening of Isabelle's mouth, but I had spent decades in boardrooms across 3 continents. I knew the unspoken language of those who believed they were in the presence of their inferior. The dining table was a masterpiece of staged perfection. Crystal glasses gleamed under the light of a small chandelier, silver cutlery was perfectly aligned on stark white linen, and a centerpiece of white orchids added a cold, formal beauty. Chloe had outdone herself, but the effort felt like a performance for a harsh critic. "So, Arthur," Isabelle began, as we were served a delicate butternut squash soup. "Sebastian tells us you were in, what was it? Import? Export?"
International trade consulting, I corrected gently. I advised companies on navigating cross-border regulations, supply chain logistics, and cultural business practices. How practical, she said with the thin smile returning. It must be nice to be truly retired, to have so much free time. That's when I heard the first words, spoken in a low, confidential murmur from Isabelle to Henri. Il a l'air si ordinaire, she whispered. He looks so ordinary. Henri responded, his voice a low rumble. Je me demande ce qu'il trouvait à lui, an old bureaucrat without a past. I continued to eat my soup, my expression one of polite, slightly bored interest, as if the French flowing around me were nothing more than ambient noise. But I heard every word, and I was committing each syllable to memory. The real dinner, the one they didn't know they were attending, had just begun.
The soup was followed by a filet mignon, cooked to a perfect medium rare, with a red wine reduction and roasted baby vegetables. The conversation in English was banal. Talk of the unseasonable warmth, the traffic on the I-5, a new art gallery that had opened downtown. But beneath this placid surface, the French undertow was pulling strong and cruel. As Chloe excused herself to check on the dessert, the masks slipped completely. Isabelle watched her go, then turned to Henri. Elle s'épuise à s'occuper de lui, tu ne trouves pas? Elle a l'air fatiguée. She exhausts herself looking after him, don't you think? She looks tired. C'est un fardeau, Henri agreed, slicing into his meat. Un point mort. Elle serait bien mieux sans lui. Plus libre. Elle pourrait se concentrer sur sa propre famille. He's a burden, dead weight. She would be better off without him, more free. She could focus on her own family. My knife hovered over my plate for a second. Dead weight. The words landed with the force of a physical blow. I took a slow, deliberate sip of water, forcing my hand not to tremble. Sebastian, emboldened by his parents, leaned in. Ne t'inquiète pas, papa, on s'en occupe. Il ne sera pas un problème beaucoup plus longtemps. Don't worry, papa, we're handling it. He won't be a problem much longer. The audacity of it, the cold, premeditated planning, stole my breath for a moment. This wasn't just casual cruelty, it was a strategy session. Isabelle dabbed her lips with a napkin. Regarde-le, il est perdu dans ses pensées, sénile peut-être. Look at him, he's lost in his thoughts, senile perhaps. Pathétique, Henri concluded, his voice final, as if delivering a diagnosis. Toute une vie pour en arriver là, à être toléré par pitié. Pathetic, a whole life to end up here, being tolerated out of pity. I set my fork down carefully, the silver making no sound against the fine china. I looked at Sebastian, who quickly averted his gaze, a faint smirk playing on his lips. In that moment, any lingering hope I had for his character evaporated. He wasn't just a weak man influenced by his parents. He was an active participant in this emotional execution. I made a choice then, a cold, hard decision I hadn't made in years. I would not react. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing my pain. I would let the poison settle deep within me, let it crystallize into a core of pure, unyielding purpose. Some lessons cannot be taught with words. They require a ledger, not a speech. When Chloe returned with a beautiful raspberry tart, I complimented her profusely. I thanked Henri and Isabelle for a lovely evening. I praised the wine again with just enough knowledge to be slightly unsettling. I was the picture of a gracious, slightly dim old man. At the door, Sebastian clapped me on the back, a gesture filled with condescending triumph. Drive safe, Arthur. Great to have you. In the quiet of my car, the dam broke. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles were white, the hum of the engine the only sound against the roaring in my ears. I drove home through the dark streets, the festive lights of the houses seeming to mock my inner turmoil. Back in my study, the familiar scent of old books and leather was a comfort. I sat at my heavy oak desk, a relic from my active business days, and pulled out a yellow legal pad. At the top, I wrote a single, stark sentence: remember everything. Then I began to write. I transcribed their words, first in French, then in the English translation. I noted the speaker, the context, the flicker of expression that accompanied each dagger. Page after page filled with their venom, a detailed record of the debt they had incurred. It was no longer just hurt feelings.
It was evidence. When I was done, my hand was cramping, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I turned to a fresh page and wrote 2 more words. Tomorrow, begin. Then, for the first time since the dinner began, I slept a deep, untroubled sleep.
The morning sun found me at my desk, the legal pad a testament to the previous night's humiliation. The pain had been processed, compartmentalized, and was now being converted into fuel. I brewed a strong pot of coffee, shut off the world, and made a call to the only man I trusted for this kind of work. Arthur Pendleton, a gravelly voice answered on the second ring. You only call this early when you're done turning the other cheek. Not done, Malcolm, I said. Selective. I need you to look into a small French vineyard for me, Domaine de la Luminière in Burgundy. Owners are Henri and Isabelle Duval. Their son, Sebastian, is my son-in-law. The vultures? Malcolm had never liked Sebastian. The very same. I want leverage. Quietly. I could hear the clicking of keys on the other end of the line. Malcolm was a former corporate investigator, a man who could find the single loose thread in the most tightly woven financial tapestry. Leverage or a lever? He asked. At this point, I'll take either. All right, preliminary scan. They're not as rock solid as they pretend. They took a significant bridge loan from a California distributor last year to fund a new bottling line, Sunset Vintners. The note has a covenant. If they miss their Q3 revenue targets, the interest rate spikes, and the holder has the right to convert the debt to equity at a heavy discount. My pulse quickened. This was it. The crack in the foundation. Is the holder nervous? Wouldn't you be? Their U.S. sales have plateaued. The distributor, a guy named Robert Chen, is sweating. He'd sell the note if he could get most of his principal back. Open the door, but not through me. Set up a Wyoming LLC, Cheyenne address, a clean registered agent. Call it High Desert Acquisitions. Get the EIN, I'll fund the account today. You're serious about this? I have never been more patient, I replied. Send the purchase docs for the note. And Malcolm, if a capital call is coming for this expansion, I want the legal right for High Desert to satisfy it unilaterally. He let out a low whistle. That's the kind of clause that makes new friends, the kind that clarifies who's in charge. By noon, the skeleton of my plan had bones. High Desert Acquisitions LLC was born. The bank account was open. The wire was sent. Malcolm texted, "Note seller is ready. Price is fair, if you're not being sentimental." "I'm not," I texted back. He called an hour later. "More kindling. They did a small friends and family raise in France a few years back. 2 minority holders. One is looking for an exit. If High Desert buys them out and that bridge note converts, you'd be creeping up on a controlling interest." "How much control?" 51%, maybe 52%. Barely, but enough. A quiet, grim warmth spread through me. This wasn't about hunting for ruin. It was about seeking a correction, a recalibration of power where truth had consequences. "Make it happen in 10 days, I said. "You're giving them very little room to breathe." They didn't give me any. When I surfaced as the buyer, I couldn't be Arthur Pendleton, the pathetic old father-in-law. I needed a name they would try to impress. "Use the name Luc Fournier," I told Malcolm. "Present him as a partner at High Desert Acquisitions. Formal, civil, but unmistakably in charge." "You're sure you want to be in the room when this lands?" "They chose the room the first time. I'm just changing the furniture." We moved paper like chess masters. High Desert Acquisitions purchased the bridge note from the grateful Robert Chen. Malcolm queued up the minority buyouts. I reviewed the loan covenants until my eyes burned, circling the hinge. A capital call was due in 10 days for their U.S. expansion. New marketing, compliance software. It was ambitious. And given their cash flow, impossible for them to meet alone. High Desert would answer the call in full.
The other minority holders, prompted by Malcolm's discreet suggestions, would decline. The math would do the rest. I stood under Mr. Whispers, the maple tree Chloe and I had planted. Its leaves were just beginning to turn. The yard was quiet, a steady, reliable space in a world that was about to become very loud for the Duvals. Equity, I murmured to the tree, the fairest kind. Inside, I signed wires, reviewed filings, and wrote a single line on a fresh page of my legal pad. Change the floor they're standing on. Malcolm's final ping of the day came through. Note assigned. Minority terms agreed in principle. For signatures tomorrow. You've got 24 hours. I replied, make the paperwork perfect. I intend to be very polite.
The 10 days passed with the grim inevitability of a falling tide. Signatures were secured. The bridge note was officially assigned to High Desert. The two minority partners in France, eager for liquidity, signed their shares away. The capital call notice arrived. High Desert Acquisitions, via its representative, Luc Fournier, answered with a wire transfer that covered the entire amount. The other stakeholders, as predicted, sent their polite regrets. The conversion notices were sent. Percentages shifted on a digital cap table. Malcolm called from his car, the sound of rain ticking on his windshield a fitting soundtrack. It's done, Arthur. Filed in both jurisdictions. High Desert Acquisitions now holds 51.3% of Domaine de la Lumiere's holding company, effective immediately. On my desk, a single printed page made it real. I was the majority owner of the company my son-in-law and his parents thought was their untouchable legacy. That evening, my phone rang. It was Chloe. "Dad, you will not believe this," she said, her voice bubbling with an excitement that made my heart ache. "Sebastian's parents just landed a huge American investor, private capital. The guy's name is Luc Fournier. This could solve all their cash flow problems. Isn't that amazing?" It is," I said, looking out at the darkening sky, meaning it in a way she couldn't possibly understand. "I hope it brings out their best qualities." The phone rang again minutes later. Sebastian. "Arthur! Big news!" he crowed, riding a wave of triumph. "Major investor just came on board. The whole U.S. expansion is a go. You probably wouldn't follow all the corporate documents, but trust me, this is big league stuff." "I'm happy for you," I said, my voice flat. "Best part, he's hands-off. The right kind of money. Just wants to be around winners." He laughed, a loud, brash sound. "We'll have to toast this weekend." Hands-off money still reads the fine print. He missed the warning entirely. Sure. Anyway, gotta run. Big plans to make. The stage was set. It was time for Luc Fournier to request a meeting. I drafted the letter on heavy, cream-colored stationery with a subtle, embossed watermark. The tone was neutral, professional, and unassailable. I, Luc Fournier, was eager to meet the brilliant family behind the vineyard I had invested in. I requested a formal dinner in Portland, insisting that all key family members be present: Henry, Isabel, Sebastian, and especially Chloe, whose business acumen I had heard so much about. The reply from Henry was swift, written on his own expensive stationery, dripping with obsequiousness. "We would be honored, Monsieur Fournier. The entire family will be present. We await your arrival details." The trap was baited. I booked the private dining room at Le Soleil Levant, the most exclusive French restaurant in Portland, a place I knew the Duvals had been trying to get into for months. I reserved it under the name Luc Fournier. Predictably, Sebastian called. "Arthur, listen," he began, his voice slick with false concern. "Funny thing, my parents are meeting this investor, Luc Fournier, tomorrow night. Very high stakes, very formal. It might be better if you sat this one out. Not to be rude, just atmospherics. You know how these French business dinners can be?" "I believe I do," I said. "Don't worry about me. I've already made my own arrangements." A pause. "Oh, well, okay. Just, keep it smooth." "I am the soul of smoothness, Sebastian." And I hung up. The night of the dinner, I arrived early. I wore a suit in dark charcoal.
a shade that absorbed the light rather than reflected it. My cufflinks were simple spheres of obsidian. I was dressed not to be seen, but to be felt. The private dining room at Les Soleil Levant was perfect, intimate, quiet, with a single round table draped in white linen. I sat with my back to the door, a glass of Perrier before me, untouched. The door opened. I heard the maitre d' announce them. I didn't turn. "Good evening," I said, my voice calm and clear in the hushed room. "Please, sit down." I slowly rose and turned to face them. The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum sucking the air and sound from the room. Chloe's hand flew to her mouth. Sebastian's face went from a placating smile to a mask of utter incomprehension, then dawning horror. Isabel's perfectly composed features shattered. Henry's tall frame seemed to shrink, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Vous, Isabelle," whispered, the word a choked gasp. "Arthur? Comment est possible?" Henry managed, his voice strangled. "How is this possible?" I answered them in flawless, Parisian-accented French, the language of my 5 years in Bordeaux, the language they had wielded as a weapon. "C'est possible par la grâce de Luc Fournier," I said. "It is possible by the grace of Luc Fournier, who, as you now know, is me." "But the money, high desert," Sebastian stammered, still clinging to the wreckage of his understanding. "Vous avez supposé que je ne pouvais pas vous comprendre," I continued, my eyes locking with his. "You assumed I could not understand you. That was your first mistake. Your second was to treat your certainty as a fact." I slid a single sheet of paper across the polished table. It was the cap table, clean and brutal. "Lisez la ligne qui compte," I said gently to Henry. "Read the line that matters." His eyes, now old and tired, scanned the page. He found it. 51.3, he read aloud, the number a death knell. Isabel's hands were clenched in her lap, her knuckles bone white. "C'est une trahison," she hissed. "This is a betrayal." "Non," I corrected, my voice cold and steady. "C'est une correction. La vérité avec des conséquences." "No, this is a correction. Truth with consequences." The waiter entered to take our order, his professional smile faltering as he sensed the tectonic shift in the room. He left silently. This is not how business is done," Henry finally said, switching to English, a last feeble attempt to reclaim some control. "It is exactly how it is done," I replied, also in English, for Chloe's benefit. "On paper, in daylight, and with a long memory." Chloe turned to Sebastian, her eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen. "Is this why you told my father not to come? To hide your little secret club from your new business partner?" "Chloe, I was protecting the tone of the evening," he spluttered. "From what?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "From the man who owns the table you're sitting at?" Sebastian looked at me, a desperate plea in his eyes. "All right. You're in control, but the business plan is still solid. We have targets, timelines." "You have a majority partner," I interrupted. "That changes the plan. You have a choice, Sebastian. You can learn, or you can leave." He looked like a slapped child. I picked up my fork. "Tonight we eat. Tomorrow we work. Decide who you want to be by morning." No one reached for their cutlery. The performance was over. The truth was seated at the head of the table, and it had killed all their appetites. I signed the check and stood. The Duvals filed out in a shamed, silent procession. In the harsh light of the corridor, Henry approached me. "Monsieur Appendoten, perhaps we can discuss this in private." "Everything that needs to be said has been said on paper." Isabel's face was a mask of strained regret. "Things were said in a moment of thoughtlessness." "You meant them. I believed them." 2 days later, Sebastian appeared on my doorstep, unannounced. He had traded his humiliation for a brittle aggression. Arthur, let's be rational, he said, not even crossing the threshold. Sell your position back to us. Name a price, a premium. Walk away clean. This doesn't have to get messy. It won't, unless you make it so. We can't have you looking over our shoulder. My parents need room to maneuver. You've made your point. Take the win. This isn't a point, Sebastian. It's a lesson. You can keep it, or you can keep pretending. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. If you refuse, you'll blow up this family. Chloe, is that what you want? Don't, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. A new voice came from the kitchen doorway. Is that the plan, Sebastian? Leverage my father's love for me to force him out? Chloe stood there, her arms crossed, her expression one of cold, clear-eyed resolve. She had been listening. He pivoted, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Chloe, I'm protecting us. This is business. No, she said, her voice steady. This is character. For a moment, the house remembered her as a girl standing in that same spot. This time, she wasn't asking why people did cruel things. She was holding one of them accountable. I'm staying here for a while, she told him. I need time. We're not doing this, he snapped. You already did. He looked at me, a final desperate search for the weak, pliable old man he needed me to be. Finding only granite, he turned and left, closing the door softly behind him. It felt like his last failed attempt at dignity. The days that followed were quiet, but it was a healing quiet. Chloe moved a few bags in. She sorted my pantry, weeded the garden, stacked old photo albums. We didn't talk about lawyers or corporate strategy. We cooked simple meals together and ate them at the kitchen table. In the evenings, we sat on the back steps, watching the stars appear through the branches of Mr. Whispers. Did it hurt more than you expected? She asked one night, her voice soft. It hurt exactly as much as truth costs, I said. She nodded, understanding the economy of that answer. When Pierre called, I let the phone ring. The paper had spoken. The slow, meticulous work of righting the ship began. I chaired a remote board meeting, my voice calm and authoritative. We adopted new financial controls and established an independent compliance officer for the U.S. expansion. Sebastian's name was quietly removed from all operational oversight. It wasn't a spectacle. It was a line item. One morning over oatmeal, Chloe said, I want to go back to school, Dad, for business law. I want to build something that is mine, something no one can ever use against me. Start with an application, I said. Momentum doesn't arrive. You make it. That afternoon, we went to the bookstore. She bought a guide on corporate law and a novel by Camus. As we walked home, I said, language can be a weapon or an invitation. It depends on who's holding it. She looked at me, her eyes thoughtful. Teach me. And so I did. We started not with the sharp, cruel phrases they had used, but with the beautiful, gentle ones. We practiced the round, warm vowels, the soft endings. I wrote down sentences about grace and strength. Le cœur qui a beaucoup souffert connaît la valeur de la tranquillité, I said. From the heart, she repeated. The room felt different, lighter. A window had been opened, airing out a space that had been closed for too long. Merci, Papa, she said, her pronunciation soft but true. We cooked dinner together that night, and she told me about her plans, night classes, volunteer work. I told her stories of my early days in Bordeaux, the mist rising off the Garonne River. I drafted a memo for the Vineyards Board proposing a scholarship fund for viticulture students in both Burgundy and Oregon. If you want a business to remember its purpose,
you teach it to give back. On the back steps that night, she leaned her head on my shoulder. Does it feel like a beginning? It feels like truth, with room to grow. She laughed, a sound I realized I hadn't heard in years. I like that. The phone stayed silent. The corporate papers would continue to move as they always do, but the arithmetic that truly mattered was here, in this house, at this table. One father, one daughter, one language, reclaimed not as a weapon, but as a bridge. One future, built not on quiet dignity, but on quiet strength. Sometimes the greatest victories are not marked by loud proclamations, but by the soft, sure sound of a page turning, of a heart healing, and of a truth finally spoken, setting everyone free.